Hello, students. This is Mr. Leblanc answering questions about the Catholic religious tradition. I've got a question here from one of you, my students, and it's a great question that a lot of people ask about. Why is God portrayed as a man or referred to as he, him by so many people? This is a great question. We know that when we look into the Christian tradition, we do see the masculine singular pronoun for God, he or him. We see that in the Hebrew and we see that in the Greek, and those are the languages that the Bible is primarily written in. The short answer is that uh, we don't have a pronoun that is personal but gender neutral, and we have masculine, feminine, or plural. Now, the other thing that's really important to know on background here is that the whole point of the Judeo-Christian Islamic view of God, the monotheistic view of God, is that God has no gender. And that goes right back all the way to the very beginnings of the tradition. And in the Christian era, definitely in the consequence of Christ walking on the earth as human beings, the Christians still understood that God, the supreme deity, would not have a gender, because our gender, our sexuality, our sex is tied to our biology. Our biology is a part of our body, and God has no body, right? No body. God is pure spirit, pure, eternal, infinite, immortal, all powerful, all knowing spirit. That's what God is. And so that actually was a huge contrast towards all the other gendered visions of God, visions of divinity that surrounded the ancient Israelite nation for their history. When we go into really the Old Testament, we go right all the way back to the burning bush. And Moses is asking, okay, well, which God are you? Are you a male god, a female god, a sky god, a earth god? Are you a god of fertility, a god of war? And God's reply to Moses in the book of Exodus is, I am who I am. And since then, the Jewish thinkers, theologians, and philosophers, the Christian thinkers and philosophers, the Christian thinkers have always looked back at that and said, that means that he's beyond our categories. So it is not correct to say God is male. That is not a part of the Christian tradition. Now, what was also emerging, what quickly happened, is that in the religious milieu, the things that were surrounding Israelite, is that there were a number of all-powerful sky father gods, and that seems to be traced even to kind of the Indo-European language. I'll post some videos that might be helpful to try to understand a little bit about that. But my point today is, when Israelites were trying to understand and try to explain um, what they meant by God as all powerful, all knowing, and look over us with loving concern, they very often would refer to Father. And that could have been, it seems likely that that would be influenced by the other religious ideas that were floating around at the time. That of all the gods who wanted child sacrifice, the gods who had weird sex cults, the gods who were involved in all sorts of other things, the best way to talk about the God that the Israelites were coming to know through their history was through a loving Father, right? And Jesus says, Our Father who art in heaven, who is in heaven. So our heavenly Father. So Jesus picks that up as well. Um, all of the Christian thinking, all of the tradition always said that God as Father is a metaphor. It would be like God is my rock, my foundation. God is my refuge, my shield. These are other metaphorical images that are being used to describe what God is like, and none of them are actually encompassing everything that God is. Um, Even the Our Father itself, Our Father who art in heaven, even that is the best way, or the shortest way, or it's an incomplete way to understand the infinite and all-powerful God. So and along with that is the maleness that's associated with fatherhood. That is incomplete. It doesn't really attach or limit who God is. So God is spirit who has no body, and as a consequence has no sex, and as a consequence has no gender, right? Now, one thing does happen where God does take on human flesh in the person of Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ was biologically male, and he was a man, and he lived and died the human life as male. And so this kind of presents a scandal. Not only that he was male, but that he was Jewish, right? And so me of French heritage, or somebody else of as Cree or Norwegian or Vietnamese heritage, they're like, well, Jesus didn't come as a part of my nation, right? I'm married with children. Jesus never married, never had children. Well, he doesn't quite represent everything of my experience. So we do have to wrestle with the idea that Jesus lived a unique and very particular human life, and he didn't live every human life that has ever been lived. And so I don't know what it's like, as a woman or as a female to approach Jesus and to see in him the perfect human being whose spirit comes into us and we become united with Jesus. It's the same, but for every Christian, it's the same thing. Jesus is not who I am, and I want to be more like him. I want to be more closely united to him so that, in some sense, Jesus Christ is living in me. I think the last thing I want to say about male and female and God is that in the Bible, we also do see metaphors and poetic language that compare God with the love of a mother, compare God in a feminine way. And so the book of wisdom speaks about God's wisdom, and God's wisdom is also God, right? Because God's wisdom is also perfect and infinite. And very often, when we look at the book of wisdom, we see kind of like a foreshadowing of Jesus, because the way it talks about wisdom very much matches up with how Jesus comes into the world to teach us truth and life and light. And wisdom is personified as a woman. Elsewhere in the Bible, there are fewer instances of it, but there are definitely instances of God expressing his love for his people in feminine ways. And so there is the idea that God knows us and loves us as much as a woman cares for and loves the child within her womb. Even the word loving compassion, rahim, I think is the word. Even that word is referenced to the womb. So God's compassion is so beautiful and so tender and so loving. Another way of understanding it, not perfectly, but another way of understanding it with a metaphor is just as a woman cares for her unborn child. Anything that would limit him does not apply to him. So to say that he is male and not female, that doesn't apply to God. To say that God was female but not male would not apply to God. They're just a different sort of category. And it's difficult for us as human beings in bodies with gender, with sex. It's difficult for us to imagine a person without that. And so we attribute it, we use gendered pronouns in reference to God, because we don't have anything else, because our language isn't big enough to actually grab how big God is. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have a question, if there's more to talk about, please leave a comment below, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much.